All right. It's the top of the hour. Let's get started. My name is Scott Brooks. I'm a partner and vice president with Org Vitality, and I am pleased today to help introduce a session called What? An Agile Performance Management Employee-Led Hack at PepsiCo. Yeah, I don't know, Kira and Sachin, if you could help hack me for now, because we'll need to get started a little bit better. But here we go. And I am pleased to have with me here Sachin Jain and Kira Barden. Sachin is Director of Global Talent Management at PepsiCo, and he leads the employee listening project work there. And Kira Barden is the Director of Global Talent Management, also at PepsiCo, and leads a lot of the performance management strategy and implementation and so forth. I'm delighted. I have worked with both Kira and Sachin in different capacities in different organizations over the last years, and I've known them to be both very thoughtful, very interesting, and very attentive people in the work that they do. So couple of quick housekeeping notes. This session is being recorded, and so if you miss something, you can get that later. But let's just dive right in. So Sachin, you are first on deck.
Thanks, Scott, for the kind introduction. I'm delighted today to partnering with Kira, one of my colleagues, and then Scott in bringing this to life. It's a little tongue twister, as you saw Scott struggling. What an Agile performance management and employee-led hack. What I'll talk about is employee-led hack to you, and then Kira would take you through the performance management piece of it. But before we get started, I'm sure I don't need to introduce PepsiCo, but just to make sure, if anyone does not know what PepsiCo is, we are a $67 billion organization, 22 mega brands, present in 200 countries, and have more than 260,000 employees. And you know, I'm sure each one of you have your favorite Pepsi product, and I'm sure each one of you sort of either eat or drink one of our products. So with that, let me get into the story we want to tell you. In early 2018, or middle 2018, as we had leadership change, as most of you may know, Indra Nui handed over the reins to Ramon, our new CEO, and therefore the leadership came together to charter the next chapter of PepsiCo, and therefore we created this strategy, which we internally call Winning with Purpose, where we have a mission of creating more smiles with every sip and every bite. We want to be a global leader in convenient food and beverage industry. And we want to deliver it by being faster, stronger, and better, with some behaviors, as you see at the bottom of the slide, which we want to make sure each of our employees live every day to ensure we become faster, stronger, better. In our journey, as we defined this, we wanted to work on each of these elements to ensure that we are building on PepsiCo's strength over them. And one of the things that we launched in 2019, middle of 2019, was really Process Shredder. The entire objective was to make PepsiCo faster. And our CHRO at that point in time said that every process is guilty of slowing us down till it's proven otherwise. And with that mindset, we went to all our employees and said, hey, tell us what is that one process which you see slowing us down. So we launched that, but just to take a step back and say, we had a challenge in our heads to survey or to crowdsource, and we actually went for crowdsourcing because we felt that if you crowdsource, you're co-developing a future solution with your team versus asking their opinion or reaction or feedback on something that has already been done. We also felt that with crowdsourcing, we would be able to take our employees with us towards the solution rather than just asking their feedback, and thereafter sometimes employees don't know what happened with their feedback. So with that in mind, we went and ended crowdsourcing and really asked that one question of what is that one single process that you think is slowing PepsiCo down. In terms of speed and scale of what we had to do, we ended up at the back end creating 255 pulses or one question pulse running because we had to reach out to 260,000 employees globally, like I mentioned earlier. We had to reach them in 17 languages that we defined as critical to ensure every employee has their voice on the table. And we had to reach out to them in multiple ways because there was a set of employees who are like all of us who sits in offices and have access to laptops or computers. And there are a set of employees who are on the ground, our frontline employees who are making or selling PepsiCo, and they normally do not have access to a laptop. And we had to plan this entire thing in 6 weeks, and then we sort of had this project running for 6 weeks where we were capturing employee voice. So how did we do that? The mechanics of the process was a simple 3-step process. First was the question, which I already defined, and I told you that we asked just one question. So employees in an open-ended form could define what the process they believe is slowing us down, also give us some ideas on how to simplify it. Thereafter, on the platform, we had random pair-wise voting. So any employee who would go in would first enter their response, then vote a few times. They could vote either once or multiple times, depending on how much time and trust they had, where they would be shown 2 responses from 2 random employees, and they would vote. And thereafter, the live ranking of what is the ranking of various ideas on the platform was visible to all. And that was, again, a key element whereby we made sure the entire feedback was transparently displayed to all employees at all points in time. It was not massaged. It was not held back. Anytime they logged onto the platform, they were able to see what's the current ranking of various ideas that they may have put, or their teams or their colleagues or anyone else has put in. With that process, we got tons of feedback. We got, I think on the process shredder bit, we got somewhere around 20,000 ideas. We took them, we coded them to really see which buckets they fall in. And these were the 3 top buckets that we had: IT systems, product design, and performance management. And today, obviously, we'll spend more time on performance management. But quickly, to give you a sense of the kind of feedback we got, I'll take you through the first 2. First was IT systems. We got to understand from our employees that our IT systems were not the best, and they were slowing them down. And there were 2-3 key things that were sort of feedback to us, and based on that, we have really sort of worked upon that and redefined our IT backbone. Is one around IT help desk and the SLAs. They have already been redefined based on the feedback. We used to use Skype as a collaboration tool at that point in time. Before 2019, we were given a feedback that was better, and PepsiCo made that change and switch. And late 2019, we shifted to Zoom based on the feedback. And the third, we did not have predefined personas, employee personas, to deliver IT infrastructure to new joinees. So once a new joinee joins, their manager had to request, and there would be instances when the new joinee is without a laptop or without right IT infrastructure for a few days or first week, which was really a loss of productivity and not a very good new joinee experience. So the teams worked on personas to predefine what are the IT infrastructure that different roles need, and therefore to ensure that employees have their IT infrastructure in place on day one. And some of these, if you really think about them, really helped us when the COVID hit us, because all the joining was happening virtually. So the predefined personas really helped us to deliver IT infrastructure at homes of our employees, new joinees. Zoom is our preferred tool these days to talk to anyone, as we all are working from home largely. And even IT SLAs have helped us to stay connected and to take care of any IT challenge that emerges. Another thing that we heard from our teams was product design. They said, hey, we are very happy you're asking about processes. You're asking us which process can be redefined or shredded in a way to simplify it. Could you also give us a chance to redefine products for PepsiCo? And based on that feedback, we launched something that we call Next Big Idea. and a Shark Tank kind of an event for PepsiCo employees. We obviously did that in Q4 of 2019. This year, we are running it as we speak right now, and delighted to tell you that the winning beverage idea of last year is to be test marketed by the year end. So we really got some pretty good ideas from our teams. And in that picture, you could see our CEO standing with the winning team and some of the sponsors, senior leaders who supported that team, really celebrating that, their success. And what better than having a new product in PepsiCo portfolio based on a product design idea from team members. So those were two big things that we implemented. There was a third one on performance management where I'll hand it over to Kira to take you through the journey of that. Kira, over to you.
Great, thanks, Sachin. As Sachin mentioned, the process shredder campaign at PepsiCo, known as Have a Say, yielded thousands of comments that spanned a bunch of different processes, and performance management received hundreds of comments through this crowdsourced feedback tool. Sachin and his team, once they collected all the information, worked very closely with me and my team through a pretty collaborative approach. And as the strategist for PepsiCo's performance management process, it was a bit unsettling when I first learned that PMP was in the top of the list of processes that employees wanted to shred. But let's be real, there are not many people in any company who have something, that they can't say about PMP and wouldn't have at least one suggestion to improve it. So rather than dwell on being in the hot seat, we looked at this as a source of inputs and advice that could help us advance our process. So here we see on this slide, Sachin's team passed along the raw comments provided by employees. And my team's first step after receiving the comments was to content code the themes. And we were anxious to see what ideas employees were sharing for how to improve PMP. And we were obviously looking for some critical points rather than just dwelling in, frustration. The pain points are, of course, helpful, but we wanted to, find some novel ideas we could use. So on this slide, you'll see some of the verbatims we received. And on the next slide, we'll see some of the themes that came out. So there were three big themes that came out of the content. So the first had to do with heavy demand and workload, and the process, especially the year-end write-up, got a lot of feedback about how intense it was and how many hours it took to complete, and managers that had big teams obviously were spending huge amounts of time on this. So people were frustrated with the documentation, having to enter the system to capture the inputs, and then to push forms along a process route map within the tool. Many people were not necessarily using the tool throughout the year to capture inputs after one-on-one meetings or after the mid-year, so they complained about having to do hours of documentation at year-end to capture the feedback and examples for each of their objective categories. Then for the second theme, we found employees and managers saw very negative impacts of the distribution curve on ratings. So many comments relate that ratings were generally pushed down in calibration meetings due to very tight connections in our performance ratings and the merit and bonus given to each employee. So to meet budgetary demands, the initial ratings were often downgraded for numerous employees during a calibration process in order to ensure that a merit budget would balance out for a team. And the calibration process in general seemed like a black box to many employees, and employees wrote comments about not knowing what happened during calibration, or that it was unfair their manager wasn't necessarily representing them in their work in the meeting. It might have been an upline manager representing them. Managers wrote that they perceived a lack of control and that they didn't feel empowered. And they also saw calibration as a point of conflict by having to fight for their people by going in high and then conceding during the meeting. So it's important to note here the very close connection between pay and performance at PepsiCo. Many of the suggested changes that employees offered were under this umbrella of performance management, but they directly tied to compensation and total rewards. And changes needed to be made there as well. So as a result, our transformation going into 2020 required a very tight collaboration between multiple teams. So our team, the talent management team, the total rewards team, and then HR operations. And HR ops owns our tools and HR systems where all the information like our ratings, our merit increases, and our bonus scores are entered and stored. Next slide. So during 2019, the talent management team had already been discussing our performance management redesign for 2020 with our key stakeholders. Our sector and function talent management partners weighed in on ideas for what was working well and what needed to be changed. Our HR business partners helped us understand how PMP was actually being rolled out locally. Sometimes this looked quite different from how we intended from the COE or the Center of Excellence perspective. Our senior leaders also gave us some input, especially our CEO and CHRO, who were just in their roles for about a year at the time we started to undergo this change. So the crowdsourced feedback added another layer of inputs and ideas as we got into fall of 2019, just about a year ago. And that's when we were having to solidify the design choices for 2020. Some of the feedback from our employees and our managers through this process pushed us to think further outside of the box and to be more aggressive in the changes that we were proposing. So one thing that we changed, our objective categories, was the first time we had changed our objective categories in many years, and we simplified them quite a bit. So our CEO and our top leadership had been speaking about PepsiCo's platform to be faster, stronger, and better while living the behaviors of the PepsiCo way. We made these our simplified objective categories and then spent time working with each of the sectors and functions to map out what this looked like for employees at all levels. PepsiCo had used 2 5-point rating scales for more than 20 years. It's historically been a balance of people and business ratings that were added together for a performance score between 2 and 10. We opted in 2020 to move to 1 5-point rating scale and grounded the scale in whether an employee met, exceeded, or fell below expectations. So we built into the 1 scale ideas for how to balance the what and the how in a single rating determination, but we are no longer, starting this year, separating it into 2 separate rating scales. We examined the process steps in and out of the HR system and made decisions to simplify the process steps. The route map is the electronic form flow through the annual cycle. And we also increased transparency, so both managers and employees saw each other's inputs in the performance form throughout the year. We were looking for ways to minimize calibration, and that went hand in hand with allowing managers more flexibility to make rating, merit, and bonus decisions. Instead of a prescribed merit based on performance rating, for example, a 3 rating is awarded a 3% merit, we're moving towards giving managers flexibility within guardrails. So for example, a manager with an overall 3% merit budget could give a 3 rating to 4 direct reports, 2 of whom might receive 2.5% in a merit increase, 1 might get 3%, and then one might receive 4%. So that was a big shift for the organization. And by allowing managers to reward their teams within the overall budget, we are able to focus calibration conversations more on the top and bottom performers without all the debate and conflict that was being spent on employees who were a 3 or a 4 on the performance rating scale. We also had to work with HR operations to build a tool that would capture all the inputs for each of the direct reports in one place and to show the manager the budget and how far above or below he or she was from the budget based on the decision so they can model out what their team would look like. We also simplified wherever we could our communications and our images. The graphic on the screen here shows the simplest form of our PMP image, and it just shows the phases in the annual cycle and key checkpoints along the way. Those are key conversations. And we use this to help people understand where they are at any given point in time and what they should be focused on at that point in the year. Since we received so much feedback from the Have a Say campaign from our managers and our employees, we enforced what we changed and how their inputs influence our decisions through a series of communications that have happened in 2020. We started by giving everyone a brief back in October of 2019 so they would know what was coming and to expect PMP to look and feel different in the new form this year. So that summarizes the key changes. Now I want to talk a little bit about some of the impacts. So as we redesigned PepsiCo's performance management, We needed to be agile and to be open to the feedback and inputs that we received. We had to quickly sift through recommendations and understand what would be the impact if we changed something, what would relieve significant pain points for people, and what we could do to simplify the process. Some of our changes have already yielded time and dollar savings. The reduction in process steps and aligning our objective categories to faster, stronger, and better enhance clarity and increase the connection employees felt to the overall company strategy. The increased transparency in our performance form in the tool aims to improve trust and to create better dialogue between employees and managers. And managers are more empowered now and can make decisions for each team member without feeling the need to come into calibration meetings armored and ready to fight. So with empowerment also comes responsibilities. So we've had to work on improving our managers' skills and having performance conversations with their team members. And they have to be transparent about the choices they've made for each of the team members. So we often heard managers would say, HR told me I had to give you X when I think you deserve Y. But now managers have to take accountability for their decisions and explain the choices that they've made during their conversations with their direct reports. So all of the energy in the company in 2019 around change helped us navigate the change curve that we were entering for the PMP redesign, and it was quicker than we had gone through in prior years. The notion that every process was guilty until proven otherwise created an expectation that change would be happening across many processes in the organization and in a quicker way than we typically would execute change. So now as I reflect back on where we were just a year ago, I realized that the crowdsourced feedback forced us to be more agile in our thinking and in our planning. We had to be more transparent about the change as we set expectations that change would occur and that the people had given us feedback on what they wanted to see change. Little did we know then that those lessons we had last year would prove to be very valuable as we got into 2020. Of course, now with the global pandemic impacting all of us worldwide, we've had to shift our PMP process real time to react to the changing business realities. The simplified approach has allowed for more dialogue between managers and employees to stay focused on business needs. It's also required our talent management and total rewards teams to stay very connected with decisions around compensation for year end as our company's business performance has shifted throughout this particular year. So that hopefully gives you a quick summary of how we took that crowdsourced feedback and implemented it real time in terms of making process changes and recommendations for our performance management cycle throughout the year at PepsiCo. So thank you for listening to Sachin and I tell you a little bit about what we've done over the last year.
That's fantastic. I've got some questions, and we'll also have some time to take some questions from the audience. But the rest of the session will basically be spent in some Q&A with Kira and Sachin. So Sachin, I got a question I'm going to start with. So there's lots of ways to identify problems and try to figure out solutions. What made you think that with all the process shredding that Pepsi needed to do, that employees were the ones really that had the answers?
That's a beautiful question, Scott. I would say we didn't know when we started off. So it's not that someone told us or we had a certain idea. But in our debate, when we were certain at a point in time that we have to redefine our processes to be faster, once we landed there, then we were clear that we as COE would not be able to redefine them the way we want it. Because we had redefined processes for last 20 years or 30 years, and we still had feedback that they were not simple or they were not fast enough. So at that point in time, we said, who's the consumer of our process? Trying to live one of the seven PepsiCo way behaviors to be consumer centric. And we said, okay, if the consumer is our employees, then who better to ask what is painful or what is something that should be shredded? So we didn't have the answer early on, but once we were clear that we have to go behind processes, we defined the consumers of the process, and then we said, let's ask the consumer, what is the challenge? And that's why we went to employees to ask them the same question.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's interesting. You mentioned that you've had the same processes for a long time. Kira, one of the things that you said in your talk just now is that you've had, I think, the same 5-point rating scales since before the turn of the millennium, if I'm reading you correctly. Could this change that you've done have happened at all without the executive charter and the process shredding card that you got to fling down to get all the cross-functional stuff going and everything that was happening? Well, could you have just chartered this on your own?
So I'll tell you, prior to our new CEO and CHRO coming into place, we had been piloting, not even the new scale, but just some simplifications to PMP for about 3 years. And we had struggled to get global buy-in across all of our different sectors. So by having the new CEO, new CHRO, and putting forth this process, it really changed our whole mindset as an organization. Like, change is coming, and the resistors, couldn't just fight all the data that we were providing on an annual basis of like, here's a pilot group and here's how it compares to the rest of the company, which is what we had been trying to use as our way to make change in the past.
Yeah, and
I want to come back. Oh.
Yeah, I'll just chime in here, Scott. Apart from the sponsorship, which was essential, like Kira said, right? Other thing that created pressure for us to, or put us on a burning platform, was this crowdsourcing. And because it was transparent, even before we went and presented to the executive committee that, hey, these are the top 3 areas that our employees are telling us to correct, everyone in the company knew about it because they could see the live voting. So with the process, there was a burning platform that was created where none of us could hide behind anything. Obviously, the sponsorship was there, but it got, the process got accelerated because we had this transparent feedback system, which everyone knew what's the feedback. Everyone knew what's the key processes to be shredded or worked upon. So if we had not done, or if Kira's team had not done what they did, I'm sure we would have got lots and lots of questions from our employees, if not from senior leaders.
Mm-hmm. Sachin, you were talking about launching into this crowdsourcing thing. A lot of processes could have been identified. Did it surprise you what came up? And I'm going to ask you, Kira, the same question in just a second.
Yeah, there were. So the beauty about crowdsourcing, Scott, is that I didn't need to know what I'm going behind, right? I just defined this simple question. So for instance, I would have never gone and asked people about performance management. I would have never gone and asked people about, do you like Zoom or do you like Skype, right? Those are never questions that I would have asked in any of my survey. So crowdsourcing actually helped me that I didn't know what people think or like what would come up. But definitely, I don't know whether I was surprised, but as a COE, talent management COE, there was that initial level of discomfort that all of us had, and I'm sure Kira also had, when we started seeing results coming in, and we saw, and we have just shown you top 3. If in top 20 there were 5, 6 of HR processes. So there was a sense of discomfort that all of us got into when we started seeing the results coming in. But I think for any improvement, discomfort is the first step. So we are delighted we had this feedback. We are delighted we all sort of worked upon it and got to where we got to.
Yeah. Kira, are you surprised that performance management landed on the top 3?
At first I was, to be honest, like when I was in the hot seat and it was like, oh my gosh, here's thousands of comments and they're all about the process you owned. It was a little daunting. I was thinking, well, people probably nominate local processes of things that they do day to day. And that's true, they did. We got, thousands of different comments through this process. But then, what we were looking for was like volume, right, by topic. And so when I thought about it that way, it wasn't as surprising, since performance management is one of the talent processes that touches everyone in the organization. And it's also highly charged, right? It impacts people's compensation and future career options. And, once I took this role about, I guess, 2.5 years ago now, I realized every time I walk in a room and I say what I do, people always say to me, let's set up a one-on-one, because I think it's about performance management.
I know what to tell you. Yeah.
So I guess in the end, it wasn't that surprising, but when we got the first data pull from Sachin and it showed PMP as, one of the processes people wanted to shred in the company, it felt a little bit like a stab in the heart.
Yeah. One of the things I wrote down, we'll come back to this later, is that if you really want to change your PMP process, go off and get yourself a new CEO.
That was, but it is for us. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a question that came in that I want to sort of touch upon. So all of this started to try to make processes more efficient. But in the end, the ultimate Shangri-La is to make PepsiCo more effective and perform better. Do you have any way to sort of distinguish those two pursuits? How do you make PMP better and save the hours and the time and the frustrations, versus any sense yet of whether or not the new process is better for PepsiCo, like the impact of it all?
Yeah, so what's interesting is during the pilots that I talked about a few years ago, we were collecting data all the time. Like, these 5,000 people that were in the, pilot, how were they reacting to every little thing that we did? And we had control groups, so we had a lot of data to show that things were changing. We haven't really done any reaction surveys since we've put this forward. And I think that's also very interesting, because I think sometimes people perceive that if they said they didn't like it, that we would change it again. And I don't think that we're going to do that again in this case.
I don't like to exercise. That doesn't mean I shouldn't do it.
There'll be some questions that we look at from the org health survey, which Sachin and his team are running right now, that we can, draw conclusions about performance management through those, but we haven't gone out with a particular survey and said, okay, we made each of these individual changes, how are you reacting to them? I will say, after we change our objective categories to faster, stronger, and better, at first some people were like, wow, that's way too simple. And then, the feedback we get from talent management and our HRBPs who are actually rolling this out in the field is very positive, that, people hear our CEO and our senior leadership team talk about these pillars all the time. There are slides in our town hall decks that say, here's what we're doing to be faster, stronger, and better. And people can very clearly see now how their work ties into each of these broader, pillars and work that we're trying to accomplish at the company.
Have you had the opportunity to touch base much with the owners of the other processes that got shredded, and see if they would have said almost exactly what you just said?
Yeah,
impact versus.
Yeah, no, I keep in touch with like all the teams, like Kira and other teams who kind of took our feedback and tried to do. So I would say this, with the new leadership and like the mandate, as Kira was mentioning, no one has measured it the way we should like do the reaction surveys that Kira was mentioning. And we are running right now our annual survey, and we have a couple of items there where we would probably get a sense of what's happening. But I would say this, and it may be partially because of COVID, our surveys, as in different surveys that we do through the year, are telling us that our engagement and energy is probably at its peak, never seen before, like at least in last, I would say, from 2013 onwards, I have clear-cut data with me. I could say our engagement and our energy are at the highest. Now, that could be 2020 because of COVID, and Scott, we have discussed it before. It may be because of the, the crisis, and everyone looks towards the organization and be more positive. It may be some bit of that, but some bit of it I would also give to the fact that employees may be, trusting the organization more and believing more, because whatever feedback they gave us through, say, Have a Say or Crowdsourcing, we are working on it. There is constant communication to inform employees, hey, you told us this is what we have done. And I'm hoping they are seeing the results of their feedback, and hopefully their lives are getting more simplified. The real test, again, even through the COVID, we are able to survive. Like Zoom, one of the things was Zoom came into our lives instead of Skype. And all of us who use Zoom can vouch for it. It made our life simpler. And we could survive during COVID because of it. So it's a mixed bag. We don't have a measure completely in place right now, and we may get that in the current survey we are running. But anecdotally, I could say that there has been positive movement on those fronts.
Interesting. You mentioned COVID. So the data from the crowdsourcing and the suggestions all came back in pre-pandemic. And yet now you're implementing during the pandemic. I don't know if Kira, Sachin, you have any sense of, is this just good stuff to do? Is this something that just happened to hit and be more compatible with feedback anywhere, whether it's with remote workers or anything? How does this now fit into the pandemic, given that you started before then? Kira, you want to start?
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, obviously we had no idea a year ago that we'd be faced with what we've gone through, across the world, particularly, in our own jobs and in PepsiCo. But I think it set the precedent that the company needs to be more agile, needs to make changes. And so a year ago, if you had, we did tell the talent management partners and HRBPs we're changing the rating scale, their, hair stood up and they got very anxious and wanted all this information. And now in the scheme of everything else that's happened this year, honestly, the rating scale change hasn't been the biggest news around the company. So, there's still definitely anxiety, but I think people have seen the organization do things that we never thought were possible. We've got tons of examples of things that have happened where, the company's pivoted in 72 hours and created, a new distribution chain or something like that. And I don't think anyone thought we were ever in a position to be able to move that quickly. So hopefully, part of what happened through the Have a Say was to build people's confidence that we could make change and we could be agile and, flex as we needed to, because it certainly has helped us this year.
Yeah, and I'll just add on, Scott, a couple of cultural elements that Have a Say or that helped us thrive, which are helping us now during COVID. One, Kira has already spoken about agility and that willingness to change, willingness to shred a process which was established for 20 years. That's one, which is agility and everything. And second was transparency. I think those cultural attributes that we developed some muscles on, I would not say we were, up there when the COVID started, but because we had taken those baby steps, that helped us or that enabled us to move pretty quickly when COVID hit us. So, apart from just agility and willingness to change, I think that cultural attribute of transparency, cultural attribute of listening and then acting quickly, all those things, are helping us during COVID time. So that's enablement.
Mm-hmm. So as we start to wrap up, I want to ask you each question. So if you think about the audience here, they presumably don't work for PepsiCo. They might not have a new CEO and all of the learnings and resources that you have to date. If you were to think about, some of the lessons and things that you've learned that might translate into other organizations or other contexts, what kinds of advice or observations would you give? Who wants to start?
I can go in and say from a listening standpoint, we spoke about crowdsourcing, but that does not mean typical surveys do not have a place. We call our listening program, we term it as intelligent listening. And why we say it intelligent listening? Because we clearly, for every intervention, we define why are we doing it, what do we want to know about it, and who takes the action out of or based on what we listen, or what is the action, or who's responsible for that. So those things are defined, and thereafter you go behind technology of what technology can help you make a best implementation. So I would say no one, like audience, should not think that crowdsourcing is a solution for everything. It's a pretty good tool in your repertoire, but there are different techniques, normal surveys, different kind of surveys, different kind of intelligent listening, like text analytics on different things. You have a mix of them for whatever you want to achieve in your organization. And the key things to define is, why are you doing it? What do you want to listen from employees? The technology that you want to leverage. So those are things that you need to take care of when if you're defining a listening program or a project for yourself.
Great. Kira?
So I would say, being open to the feedback from managers and employees was a key pivot for us here. So, if somebody had said, 2 years ago, hey, go out and redesign PMP, which they did, we brought together all of our talent management partners, HRBPs, IO psychologists, and started to, dissect the process and think about it that way. But our employees and our managers are living and breathing this every day, and they often have pretty impactful suggestions, and we found that through the crowdsourced feedback. So while we didn't, get any magical answer on what our rating scale should be from someone's comment in the crowdsourced feedback, we heard people say, we want to change the rating scale. We want things to be simplified. So once we did that, then we were able to bring in the experts who could think about the measurement aspect of things and what do the actual words mean and the anchor points to make those decisions. But, knowing that that was a big pain point for people, we were able to, launch off of that and then make some strategic choices.
Yeah. So you took the customer, to sort of characterize the problem, but didn't necessarily take their solutions.
Yeah, and similar with total rewards, obviously that whole area is rife with people complaining about, their pay isn't fair, or their manager doesn't have the input on their decisions. And so, total rewards has gone back and really thought about what that means and how do we give more discretion and what does that look like. Employees didn't lay out the groundwork for that, but obviously let us know that that was a huge pain point and something they thought was very unfair in the process.
Great. Well, hey, this has been fantastic. I want to thank you both. I know that you each kind of represent the yin and the yang of listening and then actually using that to work. But you each have, I think, a little dot of the other's role inside your own. This has been really valuable and really helpful. So thank you for sharing and being open to talk about what's been going on inside PepsiCo. Couple of housekeeping things as we close out. Number one, to everybody, as you shut down, as the session ends, you will be presented with the opportunity to answer a couple of questions about the session, which is really valuable, of course, in the spirit of listening and responding to that. Also, this is the second day of our virtual conference, and we've got 3 sessions left. Starting up in 15 minutes is how to build an anti-racist organization. An hour after that, that's only a half-hour session, but the following hour at 2 p.m. Eastern is listening during times of crisis, where Medtronic will share some of their findings and thoughts and lessons. And then finally at 3 p.m. Eastern time, we're going to have crafting the employee message in today's survey results, where we're going to have speakers from GlaxoSmithKline, Qualcomm, and Jenny's Splendid Ice Creams, each talking about how they are connecting and listening and working with executives to understand things through this challenging 2020. So thank you, Kira. Thank you, Sachin. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye. Take care.
Bye.